So we have some new supply details regarding the OLED iPads we should see launch in 2024, so of course, let's delve into it. So according to pretty credible Korean source The Elect, they tell us BOE is going to be producing a new production line for OLED panels that are going towards future iPads at their existing B16 factory in China. Now this should be a production line set up for Gen 8.6 OLED panels, and these have a higher yield rate, resulting in them being more cost effective. Now this news might be surprising to some because BOE's been pretty fishy in the past. For example, they have failed Apple's verification test multiple times, and also recently they modified the panels with iPhone 13 models without Apple's permission, and as a result, production was suspended. But I think the big reason BOE is being trusted once again is the fact they will produce these panels at a much cheaper rate, and Apple cares about their margins. However, it does seem the initial plan is to give Samsung Display and LG Display some orders, and so production is going to be split between these three suppliers. And this is good news because Apple has been reliant on China for years, and so when there's lockdowns there, Apple's production is massively affected. That's why Apple issued a press release saying iPhone 14 Pro is going to face massive delays because Apple relies on China for most of their iPhone production. And so yeah, splitting OLED production for these OLED iPads and giving some orders towards South Korean suppliers, that's a great move. Now apparently Samsung and LG are actually going to use older Gen 6 production lines initially for the release, but after the launch they will convert to the Gen 8.5 production lines that BOE is going to use. That should give you a higher yield rate. Now all these suppliers are going to produce 2 stacked tandem OLED displays that should be a mix between flexible and rigid panels, so you get the better colours and contrast ratio of the flexible panels, but the additional durability the rigid panels offer. And yeah, the report does tell us that compared to the mini LED panels, we should see 2 times the brightness and 4 times the longevity with these panels. And that makes sense because many of us use iPads for years, and so longevity is important. And yeah, ultimately I think the move to OLED makes sense because you still have blooming issues with mini LED, and of course the blacks aren't quite as deep, and so yes, OLED's going to be a big upgrade for iPads. Now regarding the release, it should be with the next iPad Pro refresh, and since we see refreshes every 18 months, that should be in early 2024. And for those worried the bigger size is only getting the OLED upgrades, that's thankfully not the case. Both sizes are going to get OLED, and that's great news because right now we have way too many 11-inch iPads, and so the 11-inch Pro needs a display upgrade to differentiate it from the other models. And to be honest, I'm pretty sure the reason the 11-inch never got the mini LED upgrades is because A, it's very hard to produce, but also it's very expensive to produce. That's why the 12.9-inch got so much more expensive. And so yes, OLED should fix this. But ultimately, like I've said in previous videos, Apple should focus on the software first. There is tons of work to be done with the iPadOS experience. The hardware is pretty good as is, and so I'm hoping that to accompany these upgrades, there are new software features with these iPads. Anyways, let's delve into your comments. So Alex H says, Drew from Talos of Tech had a good theory that Apple is waiting for the Mac transition to be fully over as we got the redesign and the new Apple Silicon chips, and then after the Mac Pro is updated, Apple will start to give the iPad more love, not only hardware-wise, but possibly software-wise too. It should be the biggest set of upgrades since the 2018 iPad Pros. Now I'm hoping Drew's right about that because it does seem like the iPad's in a pretty awkward stage right now where of course it's getting all this high-end hardware like the M2 chip, but the software's not fully utilizing it. And so yes, maybe once the transition's fully complete and we're done with the Mac Pro refresh, then we see Apple give the iPad some attention. So Michael0788 says, Apple could take a year and just focus on software. The hardware's so ahead of its time. It has afforded them the opportunity. They need to figure out multitasking for the iPads. Also, now the iPad's a maturing product, I do get why you wouldn't move to a Mac-based iPad future. It will eventually get to it anyways. So I don't fully understand the last part of that comment, but yes, I do agree that we don't need hardware updates on a regular basis with iPads. Apple should just focus on the software instead, and I definitely think we're heading towards some sort of hybrid device that combines the best of the iPad and the Mac. I guess the only thing stopping Apple from doing that is obviously the fact they want you to buy both, But with the iPad being a pretty confusing product, I think it just makes sense the iPad adopts more macOS-like features. So no one you know says, if only they made macOS for the iPad when it was docked to a keyboard and mouse, man, that would be a great purchase, but it would really eat into the current MacBook Pro 16-inch. And yeah, I'm guessing the iPad cannibalizing Mac sales is their biggest worry right now, but I think they could make a few compromises with the macOS experience on the iPads that prevents Macs from being cannibalized. So for example, like no one you know's mentioned, we could see macOS only work when docked with a Magic Keyboard. Also, maybe it's limited to high storage tiers, or maybe you can't go back to iPadOS if you choose to use macOS. Also, do remember higher-end MacBooks are still going to have the better chips, and so yeah, there's many compromises they could make, but ultimately giving us access to macOS on the iPads would be a massive upgrade. So Mad Max regarding the 16-inch iPad says, would be sweet, but expensive. I bet the starting price would be around $1,800. And yes, if we do see a 16-inch iPad materialize, which by the way I don't think is going to be the case, but if it does, then yes, it's going to be very expensive. And if you're wondering why I think a 16-inch iPad does not make sense, A, it would be way too bulky to carry around and kind of goes against the portability of an iPad, but also nobody really needs a massive iPad. Yes, I know those doing art on iPads might appreciate the bigger size, but that's a pretty niche market. And we do have a comment regarding that. Kevin says, as an artist, I look forward to a 16-inch iPad and I am willing to pay for it. As for portability, they argue the 16-inch MacBook Pro is completely fine, so the iPads, being a thinner and lighter product, should be fine. Now yes, the iPad by itself is fine, but of course, most consumers buying the higher-end iPads also get the Magic Keyboards, and do remember the 12.9-inch Pro with the Magic Keyboards is heavier than the 13-inch MacBooks, and so a 16-inch iPad with a Magic Keyboard should be way too heavy for most consumers, and that's why I think it makes no sense. And yes, I know an artist would appreciate this, but I'm sure Apple knows the numbers, and ultimately I think they're a pretty niche market of iPad users, and so this 16-inch iPad's kinda useless. Also, do remember that it's gonna be way too expensive. If you get this and the Magic Keyboards and the pencil, I'm sure it's gonna be way more expensive than even some M2 Max MacBooks, and this would have the regular M series chip, and so yes, we don't need this. The only possibility that could maybe justify this is if we got macOS on the iPads, but without that, yeah, this is redundant. Anyways, that's about it, but tell me your thoughts regarding this in the comments. Anyways, thank you for watching, guys. Make sure to like and subscribe for the latest Apple news and rumours. Check out the video above on details regarding the M2 iPad Pros, and on that note, see ya peeps.